students, welcome to today's session. Today's session is in continuation with our previous session in which we had detailed explanation of the lesson Deep Water by William O. Douglas. And let us start today's session in which we'll have detailed explanation of the remaining part. Let's have a quick recapitulation. The story is an autobiographical account of William Douglas' fear of water, and we have so far learned that William Douglas, as soon as he had realized his fear of water, that he suffered from hydrophobia, he decided at the age of 9 or 10, he decided to learn swimming at YMCA pool. And at the same time, the author mentions how he had actually developed this aversion to water, and that was at the age of 3 or 4. Now, when he was in YMCA pool, a misadventure occurred. He was thrown into the pool by an 18-year-old boy, and Douglas struggled a lot. He tried to save himself, and 2 to 3 times he went to the tiled bottom of the pool, but he could not come out of the water. He could not come out of the pool. Let's see what was the story. Now the story continues. So we saw in the previous part, in the very last part of the previous session, that Douglas felt that as if he was dying. He felt that the curtain of life almost fell. The next I remember, I was lying on my stomach beside the pool, vomiting. Which chap? The same boy who had thrown him into the water, that threw me in, was saying that he was just kidding. He said that, but I was only fooling. But on the other hand, someone else made the remark and showing enough sympathy for this young boy, Douglas, that the kid nearly died and be all right now. And the person consoled with Douglas and let us carry him to the locker room. Locker room is generally referred to a changing room, generally found in a sports stadium or a swimming pool. Several hours later, I walked home. Let's see, what was the impact of this misadventure that took place at the YMCA pool? Did he go to the swimming pool the next day or what? Several hours later, I walked home. I was weak and trembling. I shook. He was trembling. He just shivered for a long time. He quivered and cried when he laid on his bed. He couldn't eat that night, and for many days a permanent fear, haunting fear was in his heart and mind. Even the slightest small strain would make him upset, making him feel wobbly, feel weak in the knees. He could not stand properly, and he would feel like vomiting. He would feel sick to his stomach. And he never went back to that pool. He feared water. He avoided it whenever he could. A few years later, now that was the incident that occurred when he was 10 or 11 years old, and that means after that incident he never went to the pool again, and he never made any attempt to learn swimming. After several years later, when he came to know the water of cascades. Now again, after a few years, the same zeal to learn swimming revived. He again wanted to give one another try to it. So we can say Douglas had a never giving up attitude. So when he came to know the waters of the Cascades, the famous series of waterfalls of USA, he wanted to go into them. He wanted to get into the water of the Cascades. And whenever he did so, whether he was wading, boating in the Titan River or Bumping River, or he was bathing in the warm lake of the Goat Rocks, wherever he went to different places, he had experienced that the same terror that had seized him, that had taken birth, that same terror that had complete control of him in the pool would return. He would come back wherever he went, and he would that terror would take a complete possession, a complete grip on him, and he would not be able to do anything. His legs would become paralyzed, and almost icy, freezing horror would grab his heart. So, and we can see that he was completely under the grip of that terror which started at the YMCA pool. So, this weakness, this obstacle, this handicap stayed with him as the years rolled by. With the passage of time, it continued with him. In canoes are kind of narrow boats. Whenever he tried to go for canoeing on main lakes, for fishing for landlocked salmon are kind of fish, bass fishing, another kind of fish, bass in New Hampshire, or trout fishing on the Deschutes and Metalius in Oregon, fishing for salmon on the Columbia, at Bumping Lake, in the Cascades, wherever he went. So he went to different rivers, different lakes, different waterfalls to try to check whether the fear had left him, whether he was comfortable with water, whether he was comfortable with boating, canoeing, but he wasn't. Wherever he went, the same haunting fear of the water followed him. And it almost ruined it, almost this fear, almost this terror, almost spoiled all his fishing trips and deprived him of the pleasure, the joy of canoeing, boating, and swimming. So I used every way. He tried to use all the ways and measures that he could take. He tried to make best possible way to overcome that fear. Let's see, what did he do? I used every way I knew to overcome this fear, but it held me so firmly, so strongly. The grip, the control of fear in his mind and heart was so strong that he was not able to get rid of it. Finally, one October, he decided to get an instructor and learn to swim. So he had a never dying spirit. He decided to hire an instructor, and he decided to learn swimming under the instructions of this instructor. So finally, he went to a pool and practiced 5 days a week and an hour each day. He worked as hard as possible. The instructor, now let's see what was the strategy adopted by the instructor to enable Douglas swim properly and learn swimming like a pro. The instructor put a belt around him with a rope attached to the belt, went through a pulley, a wheel that ran on an overhead cable, a cord. So he held on the end of the rope. At one place, the instructor held one edge of the rope, and both of them together went back and forth, forward and backward movement, back and forth across the pool, hour after hour. Across the pool, from the instructor tried to make Douglas swim from one side to other side of the pool. So, and in this way, on each trip across the pool, a bit of the panic seized him. He would realize that when he did so, the small part or some part of the same panic, same terror would return and have control of him. Each time the instructor relaxed his hold on the rope and he went under, some of the old terror returned and his legs would freeze. Means no change so far. It was 3 months before the tension began to slack, and then 3 months of practice. Finally, after 3 months of practice, Douglas realized that the stress that he had due to that terror, that he had due to that fear, started reducing, slackening. Then he taught the next strategy. So the first strategy was this. Now what was the next exercise adopted by the instructor? Then he taught him to put his face under water and exhale, and then to raise his nose and inhale. inhale. So this was the next exercise that the instructor wished Douglas to repeat and learn. And Douglas repeated the exercise hundreds of times, and in this way, bit by bit, step by step, and size by size, he was able to shed part of that panic. He was able to get rid of that panic, that tension that he had due to that terror that had seized him. And now he was little comfortable whenever his head was under water. The next strategy, the next exercise that the instructor taught him was, next he held him at the side of the pool and asked him to kick the water with his legs, so that he could learn making free and controllable movements of legs. And for weeks, Douglas did just that. And at first, initially his legs refused to work. He could not have command over his legs, but the legs gradually relaxed, and finally he could command them. He could move his legs as he wished them to move. So in this way, piece by piece, he built a swimmer. Who is he here? The instructor. He built a swimmer. Which swimmer is referred as? Douglas. So finally, he was able to make Douglas a good swimmer. And when he had perfected each piece, and finally, when the instructor saw that Douglas was able to follow each exercise properly, he had acquired a kind of expertise in doing each exercise. What did he do then? Then he put them together into an integrated whole. He combined all those steps together, and in the month of April, he said, "Now you can swim. Dive off and swim the length of the pool and use crawl stroke." Crawl stroke is considered the toughest swimming stroke. So this was the direction given by the instructor to Douglas. And what was the result? Douglas did it. Douglas was able to successfully follow the command of his instructor, and in this way the instructor was finished. What do we mean here by the instructor was finished? The job of the instructor was completed. He turned Douglas into a good swimmer. So, but let's see whether Douglas was satisfied with this. So it is said that achievers do not get satisfied easily. They want to try different difficulty levels. They want to test their skills at different difficulty levels. So such was also the attitude of Douglas. So what did he do? But he felt not satisfied. So what did he do? He still wondered. He had still doubt whether that terror had completely left him. So he still wondered if he would be terror stricken when he was alone in the pool. So he wanted to try it. And what did he do? He swam the length up and down when he was alone in the pool. And what was his experience when he did so? Tiny vestiges of the old terror would return. Small remaining parts of the old terror. Which old terror is referred here? The same terror that actually started when he was 3 to 4 year old, and that became stronger when the YMCA incident took place, that terror. So he found that the terror in small form definitely would return. But what was the difference now? But now he could frown and say to that terror, means now he could challenge that terror. He would not surrender in front of that terror. Instead, he would challenge in a threatening manner. "Are you trying to scare me, Mr. Terror? Well, here to you. Look." And he would have a challenging attitude towards that terror, and off he would go for another length of pool as an answer, as a strong answer to that terror. He would swim the length and breadth of the pool. Now, this went and he continued this method, this strategy until July. But he was still not satisfied with this. He was not still sure that he had become a perfect swimmer, and he was not sure that he was completely out of the grip of that terror. So he was not sure that all the terror had left. So once he went to Lake Wentworth in New Hampshire. He dived off a dock, a landlocked area almost like a harbor at Triggs Island, and he swam 2 miles across the lake to Stamp Act Island. And what was the result? He swam the crawl stroke, breaststroke, side stroke, and backstroke, all the different strokes he adopted. And during this phase, when he did so, he had experienced that only once that terror returned. Only for one time that old terror returned. And when it happened, when that terror came in front of him, when did it come? When he was in the middle of the lake, in the darker part of the lake, when he had put his face under water and there was nothing but bottomless water. So for a few moments he was frightened, and the same old sensation returned in miniature, in tiny form, in very small form. But this time Douglas had a changed attitude. This time he laughed. Douglas laughed and said to that Mr. Terror, "Well, Mr. Terror, what do you think you can do to me?" And then as soon as he had that attitude, he braved that terror. The terror left him, and he was able to swim on. And yet, but still, the satisfaction was not yet achieved by him. Yet I had residual doubts, remaining doubts. So what did he do? As soon as he was just waiting for some opportunity of a difficult situation, when he wanted to check his swimming skill, at the same time he wanted to check whether he had overcome his fear of water completely. He was out of the control of that terror. So at my first opportunity, as soon as he got an opportunity, he hurried to the western part of the country and went up the Titan to Conrad Meadows and up the Conrad Creek Trail to Mead Glacier. And there he camped in the high meadow, the green plain land by the side of Warm Lake. And the next morning, what did he do? He stripped. He wore his swimming costumes and he jumped into the lake. Which lake? Warm Lake, and swam across from one side to other side of the lake to the other shore and back and return. And just like Doc Corcoran, a famous swimmer, used to do. Maybe Doc Corcoran was his role model as a swimmer. And what did he do? What was his achievement? What was his finding? He shouted with joy as he was able to do that, as he was able to swim. And when he shouted with joy, that area was surrounded by Gilbert Peak mountain ranges. So when he shouted with joy, and Gilbert Peak returned the echo, and I had finally conquered my fear of water. So finally he was able to win over his fear of water. Now this is William Douglas who here shares his experience. This experience had a deep meaning for him, according to William Douglas, and it had a great importance for him, as only those who have known stark terror and conquered it can appreciate. Those who face challenge, those who have experience of facing challenge and at the same time experience of conquering that challenge, can only understand in what situation Douglas was and can have appreciation for him. According to Douglas, in death there is peace. We should not be afraid of death, because When we are dead, we are no more to realize pain or any kind of problem or unhappiness or misery. So, according to Douglas, there is terror only in the fear of death. As long as we keep fearing death, we will remain in terror. And this he learned from his friend, President of USA, Roosevelt, who believed in saying that all we have to fear is fear itself. We do not need to fear anything, any obstacle, any difficult situation. Only thing we should remain away from, we should abstain from fear itself. So, because I had experienced both the sensation of dying and the terror that fear of it can produce, the will, the strong wish, the strong desire to live somehow grew in intensity. And this was the reason that he was able to have this achievement. And finally, when he was able to he further continues that when in the warm lake he was able to swim without a single piece of fear, he was so happy, he was so excited. At last I felt released, and he felt that he now could freely walk the trails, paths, and he could climb the peaks, Gilbert Peaks, and he could brush aside that fear, that terror, brush aside, ignore completely that fear. So this is it. Let's have a quick look at some of the textual questions. What is the misadventure that William Douglas speaks about? Misadventure is that incident that occurs at YMCA pool. What were the series of emotions and fears that Douglas experienced when he was thrown into the pool? What plans did he make to come to the surface? There will be two parts, two paragraphs. This question will be answered in first part, feelings experienced by him when he was thrown into the pool, and then the strategy. Why was Douglas determined to get over his fear of water? Why didn't he continue living with that fear? What was that? How did this experience affect him? Which experience? When he was thrown into the pool and he was not able to go for canoeing, he was not able to enjoy any sports activity. The fear almost ruined his life. How did the instructor build a swimmer out of Douglas? We are here supposed to comment upon the role played by the instructor. How did Douglas make sure that he conquered the old terror? So what did he finally do? He went to warm lake, and whatever exercise he did there to make sure that he was completely out of fear. Now here, this is a very important point, that all we need to fear is fear itself. Now some additional questions. All we have to fear is fear itself. When did Douglas learn this lesson? Of course, when he had that achievement of overcoming fear. What did Douglas experience when he went down to the bottom of the pool for the first time? The emotions, the series of emotions that he had experienced, we are supposed to comment on them. How did Douglas make sure that he conquered the old terror? Or what efforts did Douglas make to get over his fear of water? The various steps adopted by him, we are supposed to comment on it. I crossed to oblivion and the curtain of life fell. What was the incident which nearly killed Douglas and developed in him a strong aversion to water? We are supposed to comment upon the misadventure that took place at YMCA pool. And all these questions are very important, and some of these questions have been asked in previous year CBSE examination. So these are all short answer questions. Short answer questions, the same questions can be asked as long answer questions too. So it depends that how do we use our critical analysis, and according to the need we compress our answer and expand. So with this we come to the end of this session. Thank you.